Adam will start and then turn it over to Virginia, but then it's going to be mostly all about what's on the screen.
Okay.
Down plan. Any public comment? Any additions or deletions to the one item on the agenda? Great. I guess we turn it over to the Planning Commission and Virginia Clarke for a presentation.
Evening. Special meeting of the select board, and it is the draft of our new town plan. It has to be done every 8 years. This town plan is in 26. So the steering committee for the town plan, which you see here in this row, I'll introduce them in a minute, has been working for over a year to gather outreach, to draft new sections for the town plan. It's been a long process, been very dynamic and interactive group. So this plan, the point of this plan, as with any town plan, is to address our challenges for the next 8 years. It's a plan that is to last for 8 years. We were going to originally just use the 2018 plan and maybe tweak it a little bit, but it turns out a lot has happened in the last 8 years and a lot will happen in the next 8 years. So we had to really rewrite most of the plan with some new words that address our new realities. So we've got aging infrastructure, we've had a pandemic, we have all this flooding, we have uncertain commercial activities, landscape is uncertain for bricks and mortar. We don't know about federal funding coming up. So there have been a lot of things that we've had to address in this plan that we did not have to address in 2018. So if you can read that from where you're sitting, I see it's a little small, but these are the folks who have put many hours of their time into working on this plan. Jason Osterman, who is not here today, he had to go away on a business trip. We have Andrew Powers, we have Chelsye Brooks, we have Ian Bender and myself, with Adam Wood down there as the liaison to the select board. So, and we're bringing it to the select board for their first experience of it, as well as to the public at the same time. We also had guest drafters from the Housing Committee and the Historical Society. They helped us with the writing. We had a survey and we had some public events. And the final word on whether this plan is to be approved will be the voters. We hope to bring it to town meeting in March. So the select board's approval, the planning commission's approval, the steering committee's approval, all of those are good things, but the final say will be the voters. We also want to thank our Director of Planning and Zoning, Keith Oborn, down there, who's going to run the slides. He's been great, putting in a lot of time and energy, especially into the logistics and the legalities of how this town plan adoption process is supposed to work. The town staff has been very useful. Josh and the highway department, the water and sewer people have all had input into what's feasible, what we can do. So we go to a slide of our beautiful river that you will see several times in this slideshow because it's big on our minds. We love our river and it's a problem for us sometimes, but it's beautiful. So the handout that you hopefully took when you came in is the actual introduction to the plan, and that explains a lot of things about the vision that we evolved, how we went from 2018 to this 26 plan, the responsibilities of everybody who has been involved in the preparation of it. We didn't print a lot of copies in order to save money. It's kind of expensive printing full sets of the draft when we don't know how it might change over time. So we hope you can read it online. The Details of it, you will have to go online. We don't really have enough time to cover all the specifics of it. So you'll have to look online. If you really can't read it online, you can go to Keith and he will make you a personal printed copy if you have to do it that way. So, okay, why do we have a town plan? Just the basics. Couple of reasons. One is that we're required by state statute to have a plan that is approved by the town, either the select board or the voters, and also by our Regional Planning Commission, CCRPC. You'll see those letters come up a lot, the Regional Planning Commission acronym. In order to have any bylaws like zoning or capital budgeting or any of those kinds of things, you have to have an approved plan that is approved by your regional planning organization. It has to be readopted every 8 years. You also are eligible for certain state grants and planning programs and technical assistance if you have an approved plan. So we have had for many 8-year cycles an approved plan. And the other reason that we have it, not just that we're required to, is that it does represent the town's aspirations and our planning goals. It describes current conditions, challenges. It provides a roadmap for future actions by the select board and other guiding and governing bodies in the town. It's also used to defend town actions in lawsuits. So the town plan is a legal document that refers to the will of the voters. The enhanced energy plan, which is one section of this plan, must be certified. It's certified differently. It's certified in addition to the plan. And we'll talk about that when we get to the energy section of the plan. Timeline for adoption. We're going to present the draft tonight to the public, to the select board. Then on the 19th of November, the Planning Commission, who is responsible for overseeing the steering committee, the Planning Commission will have a public hearing on the 19th. And, you know, we'll do something like this, or we may do some slightly different things. The maps that we had requested from the Regional Planning Commission, we just got yesterday. So those we'll talk about more probably on the 19th. And the appendix with the additional information we'll talk more about. So that will be the official Planning Commission public hearing. And then in early January, the Select Board will hold a public hearing. And we don't have the date for that yet, but we will be able to make some changes after the Planning Commission hearing if we find that there are a lot of comments that need to be incorporated. And then that will go to the Select Board for their public hearing to approve placing it on the warning for town meeting, which is by January 22nd. And then on March 3rd, townwide vote, and we hope that people will adopt it. So what we're going to focus on tonight are it's what we call the body of the plan, which is the 11 sections. These cover the topics that are all required statutorily to be covered in a plan. So you will see the listing there of the 11 sections. We also have an implementation table, which we're not going to talk too much about, which just gathers together all the action items that have been represented in the body of the plan. And we also have an appendix, which is another 50 pages of additional information. This is all kinds of statistics, inventories, backup information, the history of Richmond. Those things are all covered in the appendix. So this is like the main portion of the plan. Okay. So I think that's about all for an introduction. We've really tried to, before we just start with community development, the steering committee has had lots of discussion about how we can balance fiscal responsibilities with our aspirations, how we can balance short-term versus long-term. These are all difficult questions, and there's a little more we feel kind of anxiety about how things are working right now. There are some problems, some challenging issues that we really will have to face. We want to keep the things that we all like about Richmond and the way it looks, but yet give ourselves room to be flexible and to evolve if necessary. So, okay, our steering committee members are going to be talking about the sections that they worked the most on. First section is called Community Development. Unfortunately, Jason had to be away on a business trip, so I'm going to represent the slides, the material that he gave, that he was going to talk about when he was planning to be here. All right, so community spirit recognized. It's recognized in events that we have, in neighbors helping neighbors in flood times. It's something that we cherish and that, you know, historically and going forward is something that we really want to maintain, a sense of community. So next slide. Just a few pictures of what we do. We have events. We have events with historical significance, with new significance. We have concerts. We utilize our park for farmers markets. So just a couple of slides to represent the spirit. And the third slide is the one that's the bad times where neighbors help each other. This is our flooding on Bridge Street, and we've been pretty familiar with flooding. You'll find in this slide deck, there's quite a few flooding pictures because it's kind of on everybody's mind. So anyway, that's the spirit. So we'll go next to some sample goals. So each section is composed of the current conditions, challenges that we face, then a set of goals with a set of action items that are designed to provide us with the roadmap of things to work on in order to achieve the goals that we've set up. So these are just some sample goals. Seeking effective and efficient services from town government. This is what we aspire to. We need to continue to improve our webpage, our planning and zoning processes, and communication amongst the different committees. Sometimes we feel there's communication that's lacking, and also between the town government and the citizens. We would like to maintain and enhance public health initiatives and promote community social activities. So, because we are feeling that binding the community together is going to help us to face some of these challenges that we have. And we aim to support actions designed to enable Richmond residents to access basic needs, affordable goods and services, and housing options. And we will talk a lot more about housing when we get to the housing section. So, engagement. How can we keep people engaged in the process and, you know, in dealing with our issues? And Jason suggests, in case engaging with as many community members as possible in a knowledgeable dialogue and communication amongst town groups are keys to maintaining our strong community spirit. Sometimes we feel we silo our different committees. We have many committees in town and they all work separately, and we need more communication amongst them. That's a goal. Richmond has residents who interact with town government in diverse ways. They need to be met by town government wherever they are. So it's not kind of one-stop shopping for how to engage people. They will have to be engaged in different ways depending on their needs. Continuous, meaningful involvement in solving local issues is challenging. At the same time, volunteerism is a valued part of our small town character. And we have 19 committees, so people are involved. Maybe we'll need to get them to talk more to each other. All right, then another theme out of community development is recreation. Outdoor recreation is a fundamental part of the Richmond community. And by the way, a lot of these goals and thoughts came out of the survey that we did early on in the process back in the spring. There was a lot of discussion about recreation, and Jason says our hills, trails, and river provide excellent outdoor recreation. These assets have fostered a large community of cyclists, runners, bikers, and skiers. Along with the increase in popularity, we need a corresponding increase in safety for all members of the community. We need to be balancing the recreation needs with the other needs that we have. So that is going to require some thoughtful work. Next slide, please. So we go just a couple more slides that look at our community. The toddlers hill, the youth hill by the Round Church becomes Cochrane's ski team, which is, you know, a fabulous resource, teaches everybody of all ages how to ski. They have a great competitive ski team. And so it's been a wonderful local resource for all of us. All right, then we have a few. All right, so the next section that Jason was responsible for is utilities, facilities, and public safety. This is obviously related to community development. The police department is discussed, the fire department is discussed, you know, sort of overlapping bodies work for both community development and for this section here. So the challenges that Jason has laid out here for utilities, facilities, and public safety, our community infrastructure is increasingly under pressure from costs, which have been skyrocketing, from aging, from the weather, especially he picks out our historic buildings and our transportation system. So these are going to be challenging issues going forward. We have the culverts, the small bridges, private transportation assets like driveways. There's decreasing federal funding. At the moment, we don't know how that's going to go as time goes on in the 8-year span of this program. So how are we going to fund these? That's going to be the challenge. You know, they're all going to need money thrown at them. And thinking, planning, working together. Some sample actions. We need short, medium, and long-term planning. It's very difficult to think about the long-term future when you have the immediate future in front of you to have to think about. But all of those kinds of planning are needed. If we have not been keeping up necessarily with maintenance, we may need to face that issue. We may need to think about how we can keep up rather than being faced with a large bill at any one time. So he suggests studying the cause and effect that resulted in today's situation of having big bills come due might be time well spent. So that is his, those are 2 sections that he has worked on, and those are his thoughts going forward. A final thought that relates these 2 sections together are the public health and public safety challenges. Rethinking the police department, obviously, that goes into both of these, public health and public safety. How to balance the recreational infrastructure and road safety. The opioid crisis, which is still with us. The lack of available and affordable housing is both public health and public safety. Capital budgeting in a time of uncertain federal support, and the effects of climate change. So all of those cut across a couple of these sections and are going to need thinking with some of the action items that we're suggesting in the plan. Okay, next slide, please. So the town center building. This is another picture that you're going to see several times in this slideshow because it's another thing that's really on people's minds right now besides the flooding. So one direction that the thinking about the town center and some of these challenges takes us in is emergency resilience, which is another section that is required to be in the plan. And then we're going to follow that with a related section on transportation And Andrew Powers is going to talk about emergency resilience, followed by Ian with his section on transportation.
All right, thank you, Virginia, for that extensive introduction. This, I'm sure everyone is feeling already walking with information.
Our major challenge with this town plan is there's quite a lot in it.
Virginia said we had 11 required sections. Our
2018 plan had 235 actions within those. So we tried to consolidate and reduce and streamline it, but there was a lot in there and a lot of it was important. We did our best to try to focus it, but there's a lot to address. So I recognize we have a lot to say. I'll try to keep it concise. Emergency resilience. I'm going to give the caveat. I'm not an expert on the topics that I worked with. I try to take public input, look at the plan we had, consolidate things, propose some new ideas. We're always welcoming more input to keep improving. I think, as was said, the big challenge I think that we're most familiar with as of late, I think we all held our breaths on July 10th to see if we would get wiped out 3 times in a row. We did not. It was very exciting. But flooding and fluvial erosion is the big one that we see, and flooding we're all familiar with, water rising up around here, and fluvial erosion is more like our roads washing away as the, local rivers or streams become enormous and carry everything away into the Winooski. So what has changed since 2018 has been a lot of very expensive flooding and damage, and it's just gone up and up in 2019. I think these numbers are right. If they're wrong, any of these experts over here can correct me since they see the money, but Halloween 2019 was $100,000 in damage. July 2023, we 500,000. December 2023, things got fixed in July, got damaged. And last year, I understood cost us $2 million, depleted our reserves entirely, and forced some sort of tax increase. Is that correct? So yeah, it kind of wiped us out. So it's been getting really expensive. We can only imagine the next one is going to be even more shocking. So flooding has been big, and now it's not just that. Like this summer, it was a drought. Instead of having too much water, there wasn't any at all. We were afraid of wildfires all of a sudden. So, and there was poor air quality, and we're afraid of warming winters and heavy snow taking down our power lines. So there's sort of this multiplying threat upon us from the climate that, whether or not you believe and why it's shifting, does appear to be shifting and giving us different things to address. So we're a little town with a lot to face. So in emergency resilience, we could take and the pandemic, we all saw what happened there. It feels like so long ago, but that did require us to really change a lot of how we did things. We can look at the next slide here. So looks like everyone remembers that.
Yes, we have a lot of these slides. in there
That
because it's-
that was low water right there. I remember that park disappearing entirely. So I'm just going to give a little sense of some things we've progressed on in 2018 and some things we are working towards. So, one of the emergency resilience goals in 2018 was to, upgrade our infrastructure, utilize our master plan to upgrade. And because our infrastructure keeps getting destroyed, we do get to keep rebuilding it. And there has been a lot of work. Pete Goslin and his team have done amazingly to replace and upsize culverts, make ditches bigger. All sorts of things have been significantly improved since the last 2 rounds of flooding. So still more to do, but that has been progress since 2018 on our plan to improve, make it prepared for, whatever may come next. If we could jump to the next slide, just going to share a few ideas. The emergency resilience section has 3 main goals in it. Oh, one thing I should share, perhaps didn't become clear yet. It even took me a while to grasp this, working on this plan. This plan is not just telling the town what it should do. It's not just instructions to the town government. And you can clarify if I don't get this right, Virginia, but it's more like an aspirational plan for all of us. So there's different responsibility holders for all these actions. Some of these things are things that our select board or our planning commission should do, but some things are that the community will rise up and decide to get a hold of it and work on it. So there are actions in here that are not instructions to the town government, but that are aspirational for the community, for all of us to figure out, hey, how can we work on this? So some of these, that's just some of these goals are like that. And within the plan, it's indicated like this is who's responsible for each goal, if you get to see the details of it. So 2 things that were suggested in the, I was going to say, there's three main goal areas in emergency resilience. One is to improve the infrastructure, keep improving it. One was to strengthen our community preparedness. And the third was to coordinate regionally. So 2 of the, in goal 2, there are community response. One idea was to establish, and I don't know how close we are to this, but some place in the town that really is the resilience hub that's going to have backup power and secure water and places to charge and all that. Like in our disasters, we've generally been able to stay in our homes and help each other out, but we don't know what's coming next. We could have an enormous ice storm that wipes out our power for 2 weeks, and we need to think about like how do we deal with that? We've seen other communities in our country deal with that sort of thing. I don't know how ready we are, but that sort of goal is suggested in the larger. I think Vermont just released I don't know what it's called. The Vermont Resilience Implementation Strategy suggested things like this. And another one I think we've seen is that the community network is in itself important infrastructure. Looking at some, if Susan Whitman's here, I would call her out. Susan and her spreadsheet have helped coordinate disaster response in the town, which I think is amazing. People really, I think you see our community at its best. When we have a disaster, we all show up and help each other. And I'm like, how could we be like that all the time? But I believe it is worth considering perhaps establishing a volunteer coordinator position to make that a little more structured than just like the disaster happens and like who's got the spreadsheet and what's happening. So that's one of the goals we perhaps aspire towards. Again, you'll see our language is careful here. We don't say this must happen. We say consider establishing this, or have a blue ribbon panel to discuss considering that. But we put the ideas out there. They're not forced to happen, but we'd like to see them happen. And that, what is our next slide? Am I still talking emergency resilience? No, transportation. On to you, Ian.
You're going to hear a lot of the same things regarding transportation that you just heard, except it reads a little bit more like a story instead of an outline. So bear with me. And the slides, I'm not sure how well coordinated they're going to be with this, but so what is transportation? For some Richmond residents, it is simply the mode by which we move ourselves from place to place and the infrastructure we need to enable that movement. For instance, I have to get myself to my job, so I need a car, a bike, or a bus to get myself there. And hopefully the road, if it's not closed due to a natural disaster or construction project, will not be too bumpy. For some residents, transportation is an expression of their values and their individuality. Those residents want to play an active role in reducing the human effects on climate change and make it a point to choose an electric vehicle, a bicycle, or public transportation to meet their mobility needs. In considering transportation-related challenges, goals, and actions for the 2026 town plan, we as a steering committee did our best to consider both of these types of perspectives, in addition to the budgetary and human resource constraints that our town government is facing. The transportation section of the town plan and data in the appendix provide a much more granular picture related to what was considered. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about challenges we face, some of the progress we have made since the 2018 town plan, and some things that have changed and what we would like to prioritize in the future. There are existing challenges regarding transportation that will persist well into the future. One such challenge is balancing the need to bolster the resiliency of our existing transportation infrastructure with the aspirational transportation-related goals that our community values, much like Andrew was talking about. Ensuring that we have a safe and well-maintained road infrastructure is an absolute necessity. At the same time, we want to stay true to our goals around the Complete Streets program that our committees, boards, and town staff have made great strides towards achieving. Our Complete Streets policy is a plan that guides town planning to ensure streets are safe and accessible for all users, including pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists, as well as people of all ages and abilities. Instead of prioritizing automobiles, this approach integrates various modes of transportation and street functions, such as providing infrastructure for walking, biking, and public transit. By creating balanced street designs, the policy aims to enhance safety, promote public health, stimulate local economies, and improve social interaction. There are actions around the Complete Streets program that we have accomplished since 2018, including but not limited to new sidewalks, new crosswalks, and signage for pedestrian safety that have been added in the village, new fog lines on some of the more heavily traveled and shared roadways have also been added. Additionally, multiple studies have been commissioned to continue the expansion of multimodal transportation options in the village and town at large. The 2026 plan encourages our boards and planners to continue directing resources towards researching and implementing the expansion of multimodal transportation throughout the town. Circling back to the resiliency of our existing transportation network, we found that storm-related issues have accelerated since the 2018 town plan was written. Many of you are well aware the town of Richmond and the state of Vermont have experienced several catastrophic natural disasters in the years since the last town plan was created. These events laid bare several, but not all, the weak points in our existing private and public transportation systems. When your driveway or the road you travel to work on every day disappears overnight, you quickly become enlightened as to why we need thoughtful regulation and planning around storm drainage and road maintenance. And no matter what your opinion on the causes of climate change may be, it is undeniable that extreme weather events will continue to visit our area, and with that, costly damage in both human and financial terms. Another thing you can count on is that the cost of repairs from past and future events will be falling more squarely on the shoulders of local taxpayers. As a steering committee, it is our view that going forward, it is crucial for both individual property owners and community organizers to identify and prioritize necessary upgrades and maintenance to portions of the transportation infrastructure most likely to be damaged in flooding or fluvial erosion events. This will require adequate budgeting for both mitigation and emergency repair needs. Additionally, changes to zoning regulations must continue to expand and incorporate requirements that consider the effects of extreme weather events on the transportation infrastructure. And that's it.
Thank you, Ian.
Sure.
Great. All right. Now we seem to be back to the town center. After having looked at the watery wasteland out there. So we're going to talk next about the two H sections, historic resources and housing. Historic resources this language was put into the plan by the Richmond Historical Society, who have added some additional goals, although, as you might imagine, from a historical perspective, much of the section is similar to how it was before. It's basically just trying to move historic resources into the modern world. So the Historical Society's language says, continued town stewardship of historical records, artifacts, and photos will entail safe, climate-controlled storage space and digitized inventories. So a number of their goals are directed towards that, towards the continued preservation of the historic resources. And they say, like the round church, Richmond's historic places, artifacts, traditions, and stories are reminders and beacons. They bear witness to the past, provide links between generations, and weave into the memories of those who engage with them. By protecting and celebrating these resources, the town helps residents and visitors alike to know and to care more about Richmond. Next slide, please. So a sample of their goals. Plan funding and implementation of major renovations as needed to preserve historical integrity and enhance the round church and the property. That's been their basic goal for quite a while. Protect, preserve, and continue to fully utilize the town center and the library buildings. This is the challenge that will have within the next plan here. Encourage the preservation and utilization of privately owned buildings of historic significance within the town. Preserve and protect Richmond's archaeological sites and the historic cemeteries, 2 historic cemeteries. Support and advertise public events that have become local cultural traditions, because they're also interested in protecting the traditions as historic resources. And we had to have a beautiful picture of the round church in the fall, of course. All right, we move on to housing, which is a little more challenging. The newly formed housing committee that was established by the select board in 2020 to investigate the lack of available and affordable housing in Richmond. So they've been working since then. This was a goal from the 2018 plan that was carried out, was to form this committee. They have presented a couple of their documents to the select board, and they have now created a strategic housing plan for the next 8 years that is found in the appendix of this new plan. So if you want more details about what the housing committee plans to do itself and promote, you can look in the appendix under the housing section. So the information that they provided us with, since our 2018 plan, or all the way back to 2018 and probably before that, we have recognized that diverse housing options are essential for community sustainability, workforce development, vibrancy, and minimizing personal stressors. So we have heard in outreach that diverse housing opportunities are scarce, and we would like to do what we can to address that. Municipal action alone, in other words, fixing the zoning, is not the whole answer to the housing, what some term the housing crisis. There are many factors to this. So we, on the Planning Commission, for instance, speaking for the Planning Commission, we have done a number of things. We have taken significant steps to enable the development of more diverse, affordable housing, but it's certainly not entirely within our purview. Next slide. So one of the things has been to allow more small multifamily housing units like this one. This is the corner of Far Road and the Huntington Road. I always like that building when I drive by it. It's the perfect example of a small multifamily. So, the zoning regulations now allow, including small multifamily housing on any single family lot, accessory dwellings, and there are some other reduced lot size, for instance, increased density, parking minimums for dwelling units. All of these things are trying to lower the cost of housing, which has become very expensive. And we also have in the zoning now a program offering regulatory incentives for actual affordable housing development, which is a technical term. It's not just affordable to everybody, but it's actually affordable. There's more about that in the plan. New legislation has been promulgated by our Vermont legislature in order to try to address this problem that is Vermont-wide, not just in Richmond. These two pieces of legislation, Act 47 and Act 181, have both tried to address the lack of available and affordable housing. The Home Act, Act 47, set up several new programs focused on rental assistance, homeowner affordability for middle-income households. Act 181 addressed the question of trying to make the building of housing more efficient, which is to put it where the infrastructure already is, which is in the center of the towns and villages. And this law, Act 181, instructs 85% of the new development to go to places where development already exists. The second half of Act 181 is to protect the rural areas of the state and yet still allow housing development, because these two things sometimes come into conflict with each other. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we go to the future land use section of the plan. There's another approach to having more housing, is the creamery on Jolena Court. which we're getting used to the way it looks. It was a new thing for Richmond to have large apartment buildings, but it is something that, you know, if we're going to have more housing, we're probably going to need. So. Okay, a sample of some goals from the housing section. The Housing Committee aspires to add 404 new homes to our housing stock by 2050. And this is actually a target, a housing target that was given to us by our regional planning office, coming down from the state legislature. So this is not a goal that we have established for ourselves, but we have to align it with the law and with the regional planning office that has to approve this plan. So how this is to be done is left up to the towns, how we're to achieve the housing goals. But that is what our aspiration is to be. The Housing Committee's second sample goal was to promote discussion of the strategic housing plan. So if you want to look at that in the appendix, you'll get an idea of what they are suggesting. And continuing to support the mission and the goals of the Housing Committee, they have 2 vacancies. So one way to do that is to join the Housing Committee if you're interested in this, in trying to help work on this particular challenging problem. We want to investigate, the Housing Committee suggests that we investigate all aspects of infrastructure improvements that might support additional growth in housing. Infrastructure includes water and sewer lines, roads, etc. Schools, we don't have a problem with right now. We have some room in the schools, but just let's be thinking about what are the things that we can actually work on to improve housing besides the regulations. And then consider additional zoning changes to facilitate growth in the villages, such as allowing additional building height. So these are all things that the Housing Committee has suggested. Okay, so those are our 2 H sections in the plan. Now we're going to get to the E sections. We've got 3 E sections. And Andrew is going to talk about the economic development section.
Okay, I'm back. So economic development was a little less exciting than emergency resilience, not quite as disastrous, but also I think something we all really appreciate. Everyone, you know, what we hear all the time and heard in our surveys was everyone loves a little walkable downtown Richmond with cool things in it. And I think, you know, we have seen it change since 2018. Businesses have come and gone, but I think Bridge Street's looking pretty awesome these days. Against all odds, we have an amazing bookstore in town. We've got Sweet Simone's has expanded. We've got new restaurants coming back in where other ones left. So I think we see the town is dynamic. You know, I had a hard time boiling down what the big challenge was here. I mean, I think the goal of the economic development section is really to focus on how do we attract and retain successful business in Richmond. And we did surveys. I spoke to a bunch of business owners. They're hard to catch because they're busy people, but talked to some and heard a lot of different things. But I think, you know, the big challenge is really understanding what the town and the community can best do to effectively support economic development, to attract and retain new businesses, or, you know, retain our existing and attract new businesses when we need to. So, you know, some things that have changed. Obviously, work from home was a big shift in the pandemic and has more people around town, more people hanging around in cafes and able to work locally and spend money locally. We've become increasingly popular, you know, for better and for worse, sometimes recreational destination. We have more people coming who want to ride on our trails and float down our river when it's not flooding and ski and do other fun stuff around Richmond, jump in our swimming holes. And so more people coming through town for that. Again, amazingly, we have a bookstore despite not horrible, but, you know, large things like Amazon existing. You know, online shopping, I'm not sure what it's doing exactly, but clearly has had an impact on bricks and mortar retail. And that's, you know, continues shifting how that's working. And obviously housing has been a huge problem that's affected that. I talked to a number of business owners who are like, none of my employees can rent a house or buy a house within a zillion miles of here. Like, really hard for some folks who would like to have local employees. They can't live here. So I did thin out the economic development section and just tried to focus on business attraction and retention, took out, because we already had a housing section and we had transportation, other stuff was in the 2018 section, and now it's more focused. You know, really on three major goals in there are supporting and encouraging strong and diverse local business, you know, strengthening agricultural and forest economy. We all really value that and want to see Richmond's working landscape persist despite farming being a tough way to make a go of it. And there's a couple items about updated land use regulations and, you know, constantly demanding that all these people streamline everything and make it really easy to start business and what have you. So, some progress since 2018. Virginia could speak better to exactly how this works, but we renewed our village center designation, which, as that says, that provides access to state financial incentives and tax credits and grants and such. So having this actually designated as a village center is helpful to us. And an earlier goal in 2018 was to support the farmers market. And I think we can see that the farmers market has grown and significantly in vendors and community support and continues to thrive. So there's progress since 2018. And that's not all the progress, just calling out a few points. I don't want to try to tell everybody everything. And one goal set in the 2026 plan was, and again, this is one of the aspirational ones, but the sense I had in talking to business owners was that there could be better communication between, just on behalf of the businesses, between the business and the town, between the business and the community. They're all really busy. Like we used to have the Richmond Area Business Association, and it become like the Western Slopes of the Eastern Green Mountains Business Association, but all that kind of folded up. And when I talked to people, they said, we're all too busy to go to more meetings and this and that, but we certainly wouldn't mind having some help. So this goal aspires to something of a, you know, volunteer mini chamber of commerce sort of idea. Some, you know, someone who has the time, people who have the time to really stay in touch with our business owners, business leaders, and see what it is they need and see how we can help advocate. How, you know, someone can help advocate on their behalf and help coordinate and communicate with them, not requiring of them, but to actually support them in doing that. So that was a thought there. So yeah, it's a quick run through economic development. And now on to education. Someone new to listen to. Take it away, Chelsye.
Yeah, they didn't forget about me. I'm just over here waiting, biding my time for the ease. So before I jump into sort of what I've written, when I was house hunting 15 years ago, one of the things that was important to me was a town where the educational system was known to be good. And what does that mean really? Like, right? I think you can get a good education in nearly anywhere with resources pulled from other places, but on paper, Richmond was a good town to move to because I knew I wanted to have a family and I knew I wanted kids and them to have good schools. So our education section builds on what has always been one of Richmond's greatest strengths, and it's our schools. So Richmond Elementary and Camel's Hump are here in Richmond. We have other schools in the district, but I'm focusing on those because those are the ones in our actual town. And they're not only learning spaces, they're also vital community centers. So the town plan supports lifelong learning from adult education to intergenerational programs that use the school and library spaces year round. These are investments not only in our students, but in our community's social and economic future. I know that there's lots of different groups that use our schools. I am a leader in our local Cub Scout pack. We're down there at the school. And while they're there, we're there until recently when we had our pickleball courts. We had to vie with the pickleballers for use of the gym. So the school is definitely utilized by the community by more than just standard education. The most important takeaway from this section is that education isn't about classrooms. It's about community well-being, access, and preparedness for change. One of the biggest challenges over the next 8 years that we'll be adapting to is Vermont's new Education Transformation Act, which restructures districts and is changing funding. So Richmond will need to work closely with the Mount Mansfield Unified Union School District as these statewide changes unfold. I wish I had more to tell you about that or that I knew more, but the answer even from those in higher places is that it's all still really unknown. The legislature passed these things, I think, in the last legislative session, and it's all to come and what that will mean for us. But keeping our finger on the pulse will be important. What's new in the plan compared to 2018 is how education connects with housing and land use. As has been said previously by other presenters, Act 181 with housing targets and housing goals may see an enrollment rise. So after years of pretty steady numbers, we may be looking at more students if we meet these housing goals of 200, 400, or 600 new units by 2050. And so that's something that we'll have to work with the school on as well. So we should act proactively in those things to ensure the facilities, the staff, and the transportation systems are ready. We've made progress since 2018 on some of these things. The completion of stormwater infrastructure at the school campuses here in Richmond and also at MMU. So we're getting ready and hopefully becoming more resilient as we do those things. We've also expanded early education and after school programming. I don't know if you're aware, but Richmond now has after school programming that is far more vast than it was even just a couple of years ago. There's several different programs, and it's gotten big enough that they've opened up to other schools in the district as well, not just our schools. All right, so looking ahead, one action that I'm looking to highlight is future collaboration with the school district to plan for this enrollment growth. Should we have our potential housing boom and improve campus environments, like some feedback we got from the schools here in Richmond, where it was a hope to plant trees along the highway, which interestingly I had never thought about, but as soon as they said it, it's all I can see. So that would be something the school district would do, but the town could support them in approvals and things like that. For noise reduction, safety, also exploring more sustainable transportation options. That's been a long-standing goal. It was a goal from 2018, and it continues to be ways that we can more efficiently transport our students in a vast, quite large district. Our schools are at the heart of our community life, and this section reflects how Richmond can support them through smart planning, strong partnerships, and a continued focus on health, safety, and the success of our students. And I don't know what's next in the E's, so
Okay. So
it's
we're
not a
back
smooth
to
transition.
now, which is the third E, which is energy, basically. And we have rebranded the energy section of 2018 as energy and climate change, because obviously they are related. So I worked on this section, so we will talk a little bit about it here. And this is the section that has to have freestanding approval. So the Regional Planning Commission has to certify that this meets the enhanced energy planning standards. So, so basically, we've added the climate change wording because it's clear that what we do with our energy systems is causing, to a large part, climate change. We're dealing right now with the effects of climate change, and it's been a little more challenging to then go back and also talk about doing our part to help with the causes of climate change. Once you're dealing with all the flooding, then you sort of, your thinking is completely taken over by dealing with that, rather than thinking about the causes and how, if everybody doesn't do their part, climate change will continue to worsen. So what this means is, with our current technology that we have, is electrifying the energy supply, basically, deriving the electricity from renewable sources. This is the only way that you can convert those renewable sources into an energy supply. This is difficult because all of our infrastructure, all of our thinking is tied up in the old way that we've been doing things with fossil fuel. So this plan acknowledges that this is not just an easy thing to do. Basically, it's difficult to convert all our systems to a new energy system of electrified energy. The data and additional information appendix contains a set of metrics and guidelines, which has been provided to us by the Regional Planning Commission, that is going to help us set some targets and encourage ways that we can go about making this change. All right, next slide. Let's see. It's called an enhanced energy plan because of the state and regional input with these guidelines. And what it does is, if we're certified as an enhanced energy plan town, it gives us a stronger local voice, what's called substantial difference, in any renewable energy project decisions that are made. So if someone wants to come into Richmond and make a renewable energy project, which in general, the Public Utilities Commission is going to support, the town at least will have a voice in saying how this is going to be done. In, where is it going to be and what is it going to be like? And it doesn't necessarily mean that we would be the final arbiter, because the Public Utilities Commission is the one who makes those decisions, but at least we will have a standing in those decisions. So it also enables the town to take advantage of existing resources and incentives from Efficiency Vermont, which is a successful efficiency advocate, including programs that can save homeowners money through home energy audits and upgrades. And it promotes energy efficiency in municipal buildings and vehicles. So some of our goals and action items are directed towards, when we can, to basically electrifying our systems so that they can be energized by renewable energy. Some goals of the energy plan: promotes efficient technology for the conservation of energy and the eventual electrification, like I mentioned. Promotes policies that keep energy money within the state, which benefits the economy. All the fossil fuel money goes out of state. Promotes the improvement of air quality and helps us do what we can to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So there are a number of specific goals and actions listed in the plan that you will be able to see when you look at the plan. Okay, here's just a small scale solar array. We see a lot more panels on roofs and in yards. The cost of solar energy is now cheaper, and part of the goals and actions that, since we now have a new energy coordinator, we will be able to utilize, is promoting the understanding amongst people that the cost of solar energy has plummeted and that we can actually take advantage of it. It'll be to our financial benefit. All right, so we've got just a couple more sections. We're out of the E's. We've got the last two sections. Hopefully everybody we're almost on time. Still going strong. The next section is going to be the natural resources section, and Chelsye is going to talk about that. That was one of her sections.
All right. So I feel like this section has already been talked about a whole bunch tonight, because our natural resources are sort of a big part of our town, economically, and then a sort of victim of the natural disasters that we've been talking about. But Richmond's forests and wetlands and rivers and soils aren't just scenic. It's not just because it's beautiful and rural character. They're core infrastructure that ultimately keep us safe, healthy, and resilient. The past 2 summers really drove that home. The floods of 2023 and 2024 caused road and culvert washouts, slope failures, and long-term ecological damage to parts of our town. The most important takeaway for the natural resources section is pretty simple, that if we protect and restore the natural systems that we have here, they will in turn protect us. Over the next 8 years, our biggest challenge is staying ahead of the climate curve. We've talked about this several times. Again, more intense storms, runoff hitting legacy drainage, which thankfully some has been improved. But even the best can fall victim to these disasters. So doing that while also preventing fragmentation of forest blocks and wildlife connectors, we need to strike a balance internally at the town, even just at our Andrews Community Forest and other town lands, so that recreation can thrive while also not degrading these sensitive natural habitats that we have. So what's new since 2018 is really how fully this section is integrating state policy and science. There's things that we had to add in because the legislature passed it, and in order to have our plan approved, for all the important reasons that Virginia described why we want to have a plan, we're integrating this legislation into our plan. So Act 171 has to do with forest blocks and connectors. Act 154 talks about environmental justice principles in the decisions that we make here in town. Act 59 is, you may have heard 30 by 30 and 50 by 50. That's our conservation targets sort of statewide to conserve land by certain goal dates. And then we also have legislation on Earth's resources that have to be included, meaning people can't just strip mine Richmond, I guess, for lack of a more different definition. And then on the growth side of things, all of this, when you think of conservation and natural resources, you often think not so much about growth, but really in this case, Act 181 and the housing targets that we've talked about, the town's newly opted in Tier 1B status, all of these things actually are sort of dually beneficial because they are pushing housing growth into the village center and designated areas that already have infrastructure and that can hopefully support this stuff more economically, while then in turn reducing pressure on uplands and our forest blocks and improving climate outcomes. So we've made real progress. Some things that we've done since 2018. Recently, the Conservation Reserve Fund helped to conserve an 11.2 acre floodplain forest on the Winooski. That parcel provides flood storage, water quality benefits, and rare habitat. Trees were planted at Brown's Court. And another example is that young flood ravaged trees on Volunteers Green were mulched to hopefully increase their chances of surviving another hit. So volunteers have also kept up invasive plant control along the river corridor. And these are tangible local wins here at our town level. Looking forward, an action to highlight is the adoption of river corridor bylaws and a municipal stormwater bylaw. That's a goal that we've added into this draft. This prioritizes green infrastructure and low impact development. These tools will help to reduce erosion and sedimentation, protect the riparian areas that Andrew was talking about, and really keep water where it can do the least harm to the things that we don't want it to be harming. Right behind that, the Andrews Community Forest Committee is hoping to finalize a forest management plan and trails plan. So that's another goal in our draft plan. Modernize rural land use standards that will promote clustering and limit road lengths to prevent fragmentation of high priority forests. All of these things, sort of, you may be seeing themes, they kind of work together with the legislation that has been passed in recent years. So some examples of key maps are, I think, up here on the screen soon per Keith. And together, these things are going to help to show where growth can reasonably and responsibly go, and where nature really needs the room to exist and work and function for the benefit of Richmond and the town. And those maps are all they're available somewhere that
Yes.
Richmond knows or Virginia knows.
And these are maps that actually were in the 2018 plan and have been updated now. So, all right, well, thank you very much, Chelsea. And the natural resources really segues into the future land use, which is the last section you'll be happy to hear of the plan that I'm going to talk about. So this section is probably the most different of any of the sections from the 2018 plan, because the Regional Planning Commission has adopted, because they were required to by the state legislature, a whole new mapping system. And if any of you have looked at the 2018 plan, the future land use map was this fuzzy blobby thing that we arrived at because it seemed kind of safe and descriptive, but it just had some vague areas. These are natural resources and here's the village. And however, the new mapping system is very different. It has these designations, these 9, there are actually 11, but we don't have 2 in our town. So all of our map districts, this is not a zoning map, mind you, it's just a map of where the natural resources and the other elements of a town are. They have to fit into one or the other of these categories. So our new map has a completely different look from the old map. We used the new map as the basis for our map, and we'll get to the picture of the map in just a second. And then we added those natural resource layers that Chelsye was talking about, because they also tell you where your natural resources are and where it is going to be very difficult to develop. So for instance, a ridgeline and steep slope map, if you layer it on top of the base map, you're going to see that there are many places where you can't really develop because it's 900 feet and the slope is over 35%, for instance. So in our 2018 plan, we had a lot of those individual maps, but we didn't really have the technology that now exists in the state level to overlay the layers one on top of the other. And when you do that, you see that Richmond actually doesn't have very many places that is easy to develop. We have a lot of steep slopes, we have a lot of ridge lines, we have a lot of water, we have running water, which we now see is also problematic because of fluvial erosion. So it really gives us a better realistic idea of where it is going to be possible to do much development. Now, none of the areas that we looked at, those designations, say you can't put any development here. None of those areas say that. They just say you are going to have to look at the very specific local conditions, because there are many areas that you just will not be able to do. They're not big flat areas that you can develop, except for some of the farmland pieces, which we don't want to develop because we need the farmland. So, and the reason that the state did this new system and it filtered down to regional planning and it filtered down to the municipalities is because it is no longer enough just to think that those natural resources are going to be out there if we don't think about them and if we don't work with them and if we don't know where they are. It's not going to be possible to keep what we all like about Vermont with the open space, the ag and forest land, if we don't start taking an interest in it and understand where it exists. So the maps show what is called the constraints to development. It doesn't say no development, it just says there are constraints to development. And constraints are just features of the landscape that make it difficult to develop the land. So as we, the Planning Commission, work on the zoning map and revise it as we need going forward, we have to take the constraints into consideration. Areas that have constraints, like steep slope, wetlands, etc., will need to be assessed on an individual basis if development is going to be considered, so you can see exactly where it would be possible to do development. So there are many other features now of natural areas, different takes on biodiversity protection or flood storage protection. There are other layers that we have not added on to our map, which would make even less, it would make it look like there's even less area to be developed. So over time, we will think about those additional layers. The map that our Conservation Commission and others helped us to develop has some of the important natural resources layered onto the map itself. All right, you can go, I think, to the map next. So this is a small picture of the map, and it's a little bit hard to see, but what we're talking about here is the kind of tan area are the developed areas. And you can see they're along the roadways, basically they're in the village. Those are the areas that already have development. And those are the areas that are considered, well, they're called rural general, which means maybe less restrictions on development because it's possible to develop there because there's already been development there. The kind of teal areas are farm and forestry. It's one of the 3 categories of rural areas that we are required to use as designations. Those teal areas are farm and forestry. Many of those are under the current use program. In other words, you essentially get tax breaks for keeping them in agriculture or forestry. Then the 3rd category of rural areas are the dark green areas. And the dark green areas are lands that are either already conserved, some of them are in the current use program for forestry, others of them have these constraints, which are features that don't allow much development, like the slopes or the water, etc. So you can see that there's a good amount of green on this map, which is places where we will have to have very thoughtful regulations about what can be done in the development line. Some of the other categories, the very pale blue is Cochrane's. It's called a resource-based recreation area. We don't really have that in our zoning right now, anything like that, but that will be a consideration. How can we allow this kind of resource-based recreation area to thrive? We also have the hamlet of Jonesville, the small area, which is in the center of Jonesville. The Planning Commission hasn't really come to grips with what we want to say about the Jonesville area. That's something that's kind of on our list of things to talk about, is what is Jonesville actually? Is it all the outlying areas? Is it just the central area? What are we going to do with this classification of hamlet that we have been given to use there? And then there are the village areas. There's the downtown area, which is the dark kind of purple. The pinkish area are the surrounding areas of the village, of the downtown. And then the gateway it's been in our plans to try to expand in that direction, expand the opportunities there. That's on our list of things to further talk about. So this is all going to be the job of the planning commission over the next 8 years, is to look at this map and talk about what we do as actual regulations. So that is the end of the 11 sections, you'll be glad to know. The other pieces that are in the plan are the contents and the introduction that you got as a handout. And then we have the big appendix that has the data and the, statistics and so on. We have maps, and we also have the implementation section, which is not on that slide, but that's just basically all the action items taken out of all the sections and put into a table that can be given to the different bodies that are given ownership to those actions, like the select board, the planning commission, the town administration, conservation commission. All of those groups have ownership of the action items. So that's our plan. Anyway, so thank you for listening to all of that. I'm sorry it's so long and kind of tedious, but as you can tell, we have all been very engaged in this world for a year. So we just hope to share it with you, and we will ask for any questions or comments, or we can take a little break if people want to mill about and chat. Any comments or questions that occur to people just offhand?
Thank you for your work on this.
Oh, you're welcome. It's interesting work, and it's going to be challenging. So thank you for listening to it. And, we hope that you go and look at the details in the plan, or come to one of the other hearings that maybe we'll talk about the more specific details, but they'll be even longer. So this is the monitor barn, by the way. It's a historic building, by the way, and beautiful. So we're leaving you with that.
If anybody has any questions, if anybody has any comments, my office is open. You can email me, drop in. I can make you a copy of whatever you want. We did just get the maps in from CCRCP yesterday. And we'll be printing a few of them out, especially for the planning commission public hearing, which is on the 19th. We'll have large scale copies of that for you folks to peruse it. If you're into maps, these are really cool maps, especially since they're your town. And it's our town. So that's my comment. My office is open all the time, and you can always drop me an email, which is preferred because you'll always get a response. Either way, you get a response, but you get a quick one that way.
So is the link to the plan on the town website?
Yes, in several places. So if you go to the Town of Richmond website, on the Planning Commission page, you can get to the plan. On the Town Plan 26 Steering Committee page, you can get to it that way. And it's also on the front page under news. There's a calendar section, and then there's news, and it says the town plan, and you can get a link to it that way.
I
So,
haven't posted the maps yet, but that'll most likely get done in the morning. So,
yeah,
I'll get them
and
out somehow.
we'll make bigger copies of them, but online, of course, you can blow them up any way you want. We do have a couple of printed copies of the whole thing that I'll put up here on the table. If anyone just wants to look through them, you can't really have it. We're going to leave one in the library, and we'll have one in Keith's office. So if you want to look at a copy that's printed, you can look at one of those. So we also have a vacancy on the planning commission, by the way. If anybody wants to join the planning commission, this is the work we're going to be doing over the next 8 years. So, any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question, Cmsn. You talked about the changing in ADUs, and that it has to be, that property has to be on a public facility, so water and sewer, if you want to add an ADU to your property. And now knowing that there's not a whole lot of developable property, and our water and sewer structure is limited, is that a state mandate that you have for the ADU to happen? It has to be on public?
No, that's not a state mandate. What is the state mandate is you have to be on public water and sewer to have fifth of an acre zoning. There are other issues that are dealt with in Act 181, specifically with the ADUs. They're only attached and sutured to single family dwellings only.
For
So,
ADU?
For ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Right.
There was something up there that said only for those on municipal water and sewer.
Yeah, well, it's now been expanded to anywhere.
To anywhere, yes, it's
Yeah,
always
you
been.
can build an ADU anywhere.
Okay.
And the only
That would make
restrictions
sense.
that the planning commission is considering changing is that the way ADU was originally conceived, like a mother-in-law apartment, was that the people in the main property and the ADU had to be related to each other somehow. We are thinking of getting rid of that.
I don't know how you would comply with that or how I would check that.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a little difficult for
Yeah,
citizens.
you know, you make it for your son and your son moves away to Iowa.
Show me your paper.
And then you rent it to, of course, to
Yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah.
So this is probably going to go away. That was in the original authorizing legislation that we carried down into our zoning, but it doesn't make any sense. We can't enforce it. It's
Right.
counterproductive, basically.
Thank you.
So ADUs, yeah, and we've actually had quite a number of applications for ADUs that have come in recent times.
Yeah, we have. There's been a little bit of infill development. There's a lot planned at this point. There's some that's been permitted. There's some that have been completed. We are on target with our housing, at least at the mid-level. So, I mean, we've done okay with that. Seems to be loosening up. But I think that you can expect a lot more infill development within the village area. And that makes sense from an infrastructure point of view. And it really does. And you want your bucolic area on the outside? Well, that's what you're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to change the zoning for that, which the state's already mandated it anyway. And we've been pretty liberal to begin with, even before the mandates. So that they just really turbocharged it for us.
Thank you.
And another one of the questions that's going to come up about the infill development is the addition of height.
Right.
You know, we've always said, well, you can only go to 35 feet because we don't want a ladder truck. Well, most big, tall buildings, ladder trucks aren't tall enough for. Now, there are a lot of regulations, fire and safety regulations, that provide other ways. You don't need the ladder truck. It's not required.
Yeah, and there's an insurance question out there also that needs to be addressed
Right.
with that. And we still have to get our arms around that.
And it, you know, it's another point that it's different looking. It was like the controversy about the creamery building is it's just different from what we're used to seeing here to have taller buildings. But it's a place, if you're not going to take up land, that you can put additional housing is on another story. So it may be, you know, there'll be a town-wide discussion about that issue. So.
And I would add that at the creamery itself, there before the DRB this coming next week for an additional 9 units in building 1. Because we updated the zoning to allow for residential on the first floor. Not the total first floor, the 900 square feet fronting Bridge Street must stay commercial, but the whole rest of it can be retrofitted for 9 additional apartments at this point. So that's coming, which is good. And it's tightening up there at the creamery. We'll ask them to do a few things and we'll mandate that they do a few things, such as putting in EV chargers, class 2 EV chargers there. Should be 4 ports there when everything's said and done. The parking lot should be paved so they don't have the ruts in. And there's a couple other items that we've added for multifamily housing practices, such as a green space outside is required, plus storage spaces for all the tenants. So, I mean, we're moving forward. It's incremental, but it's happening. It's happening. If we get 9 units, that's almost our yearly allotment. So.
Yeah, and it, you know, it's another difficult issue because up until now, we've been trying to preserve some space for commercial businesses in town. we have now given up this back part of the Creamery building for residential because that is needed. And commercial space is not in demand on the ground. It's very hard to finance it. Nobody knows where it's going. We've got commercial space, some in Richmond already that is not filled. So that's a tricky balance to try to, you know, allow residential use, but not have it take over everything, because then you don't have anywhere to walk in your walkable village. So that's a balancing act. Any other questions? If there's no other questions, eat the crins, desserts and the fruit, and we'll mill about if anyone has a personal question. So, great, thanks for coming.
Do we need to formally?
Oh,
Yeah.
motion to adjourn. Oh, we have to make a motion to adjourn because this is really a select board meeting.
Those in favor?
I.
We are formally adjourned. Thank you, everyone.